Om Madhuvatarutaya Madhuksharandi Sindhavaha Madhirna Santoshadhihi Madhunakta Mutoshasi Madhumat Parthivagam Dajaha Madhudyaurastuna Pita Madhumano Vanaspadir Madhumagam Astu Suryaha Madhvirgavo Bhavantunaha. It is a prayer for the peaceful, prosperous existence of the whole existence, creation. Now today's topic is very important, the message of Shivaratri. Now, when you think about Hindu religion, Hindu tradition, you often read about the Hindu Trinity. It is a little different from the Christian monotheistic Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's different. Here, the whole cosmic existence is approached and interpreted from three perspectives. The same reality perceived from three perspectives. So Vishnu is considered to be the deity of preservation, protection, and Brahma is another deity you find in the Hindu temples, is the deity of creation. And Shiva, surprisingly, and it's a very wrong interpretation, is the god of destruction. Is totally, absolutely, ridiculously wrong. So that's my first responsibility and duty. The word Shiva itself means Shivam Mangalakaram. This is the real meaning of the word Shiva. Shivam means something auspicious, something that is elevating, something that is protective, creative, blissful. That's a true implication of the word Shiva. So Shivam itself means Mangalakaram, Mangaladayinam, the one who gives auspiciousness, the one who gives good things for everyone, not only the secular, the material needs, and also the transcendental spiritual wisdom that enables you to look beyond the material enjoyments. So that's the real meaning of Shiva. Now, if you read any translation you come across, this Shiva, god of destruction. I don't think we need a god who is responsible for destruction. The human beings are already doing that even without God's help. Now, there is a grammatical, philological twist in this wrong interpretation and reading of the word Shiva as the Lord of Destruction. The word in Sanskrit is samharta. Now, harta is somebody who not destroys but dissolves. So a little bit of Sanskrit grammar is necessary at in this occasion to explain this. In Sanskrit, there are the early Sanskrit grammarians used to argue that every word in Sanskrit comes from a corresponding root. It's called dhatu. So you can't have a single word in Sanskrit without a corresponding root. So the pre-Paninian Sanskrit grammarian who lived the 3rd millennium BC, his name is Shakadayana, whose grammatical rules were later accommodated into modern Sanskrit tradition. He says, Sarvesham Shabdanam Dhadujatvam Dhadunam Anegarthatvam cha. This is the real quotation from from Durgacharya's commentary on Shagadayana Sutras. This is a specialist subject which I am not going to detail into. Now the point is, what it means is every word comes from a root, and a root can have any number of meanings based on the context in which that particular word is used, and also based on the person who is using that word. So, pravaktuhu vaividyat prakarana vaividyacha sarvesham dhadunam anegarthatvam. Based on the contextual variance, differences, based on the type of person who uses this word, in the lexicon. But you don't get angry if your own affectionate grandmother uses that word. But if a stranger uses the word, I don't think you'll be amused. So the same word coming from two different persons will have two different meanings. So also context. Now the word khru is the dhatu, from which the word samharta, the one who dissolves that particular word, comes from khru dhatu. So it can have any number of variations based on the prefix after which the particular root comes. So in Sanskrit, before a root, there can be prefixes that comes before and a suffix that comes after. So depending upon the usage of the prefixes and suffixes, it is a great marvel for modern philologists and linguists that Sanskrit has the capacity to produce almost infinite number of variations of usages of the same root. It was a marvel, it was a great philological discovery, a marvel, when in 18th century the European Indologists happened to strike this gold mine of Sanskrit language. They were surprised. How can this, it is a particular system of Sanskrit grammar which I am not going into frequently, not taught in universities only, it is taught in the traditional family tradition where people memorize 14 Sanskrit works on grammar, memorized from early days. So I'm not going to that. So the point is, samharta doesn't mean destroyer. It means somebody who brings it back to its own original cause. So samharta is the one who dissolves the effect going back to cause. It is not destruction. So also pralaya. Pralaya, you word used Pralaya. It is used, a Sanskrit word. Laya itself means coming back to cause, the effect going back to cause. If we can imagine, let us say, oil going back to oil seeds. After several billions of years, the entire universe may go back to some kind of a form which may resemble the original state from which the Big Bang took place. If you can imagine Big Crunch, the entire existence moves in a cosmic cycle. It is not in a straight line progression, but it is in a cycle. So, emergence, origin, existence, maybe billions of years, the cosmos may exist, and then the universe may go back to its original cause. That going back to the original cause is the real meaning of the word samharta, and that is the real meaning of Shiva. Shiva is not somebody who destroys. Shiva is the one who takes the effect back to its cause. So the whole process of cyclic existence, origin, existence, and not destruction but dissolution, these three functions are portrayed through this conceptualization of the Trinity Hindu religious pantheon, that is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So that is an important point. Remember, Shiva is not somebody who destroys. Shiva is somebody who preserves by taking the effect back to the cause, only to come back again in the form of origination. So origin, existence or preservation, and dissolution, and again remanifestation, that means origin again. This whole cosmic cycle rotates like a wheel. The whole existence is portrayed as a cycle, is a cyclical theory of existence. Now, that's an important point, remember. So when you read the word Shiva, the god of destroyer, is absolutely, totally wrong. That is the first point I want to establish. Now, coming back to the tradition of Shiva worship. Worshipping Shiva as the Lord of dissolution, the one who brings the effect back to its cause, so that the cosmic cycle of origin, existence, dissolution, again origin, so that it will be preserved in a cosmic rhythm. This concept of looking upon dissolution as a function of one supreme deity, this idea was established philosophically and mythologically and ritually established by Shankaracharya in the 8th century AD. So that's why he is called the Shanmadacharya. I mean, 8 deities. When Shankaracharya was born, the entire Indian subcontinent was littered with deities, all kinds of gods and goddesses, all sorts of mythological, half-mythological, sometimes even laughable ideas of deities. Very similar to some kind of a kind of polytheism going crazy. That was the condition. What Shankaracharya did, he organized all these forms of worship under 6 different categories. That was one of his most important functions as a reformer of Hindu religious tradition. Apart from being the greatest philosopher of Hindu tradition, he's also the greatest religious reformer. Because so what he did, he organized monks into different 10 monastic orders. He installed temples all over the place, about 180 temples he installed. He also reorganized and systematized Hindu religious pantheon. It is called Shanmata, 6 schools of worship. It is called Ganapatya, Kaumara, Vaishnava, Saura, Shakta and Shaiva. So Ganapatya, I mean, you have seen in the Silicon Valley Hindu deity Ganapati, almost like an elephant type, with a trunk and all that. So one particular function of human life and existence, I mean the divine power functioning as the remover of obstacles, as the remover of problems, is conceived as a Lord. So the elephant removes with the mighty trunk, it removes everything before it. So this concept of the supreme deity responsible for removing obstacles. So when you pray to God, you sometimes, you pray to this aspect of God. So Ganapati. Then Kaumara. Kaumara is, Subramanya, another deity, the one who gives leadership. Then Vaishnava, Vishnu, Krishna, all this. And then Saura, God conceived as the supreme illuminator of universe. That is Surya. So that particular school of worship was called Saura tradition. Its distant echoes can be found in the Japanese belief that the highest supreme deity, the pre-Shinto religious traditions, Japanese people believed before Buddhism reached there, that sun is the most supreme deity, supreme spiritual principle. And so that the imperial tradition comes, the emperors are the descendants of sun god. You can find this mythological belief is behind it. So Saura, Shakta means worship of the divine feminine archetype, Durga, Lakshmi, Kali, etc. the mother who is compassionate, the mother who not only looks after your spiritual needs, the mother who also feeds you with food, who is compassionate towards you, who looks after you, and also who gives you the spiritual wisdom so that you look beyond the candies of beyond the everyday enjoyments of life. So a mother who gives a child food and also education so that the child will in future evolve into a wise person. So Bhukti Mukti Pradayini is a definition in the Lalita Sahasranama, and of course you find in Chandi, other books you find mother conceived as the goddess of learning Saraswati, the goddess of protection Kali, the goddess of prosperity as Lakshmi, the same divine feminine principle, who looks after you, who listens to your prayers, who gives you not only fulfillment of material needs, but also somebody who takes you to the next stage of evolution, spiritual evolution, who gives spiritual wisdom so that you will go beyond the need for material enjoyments. So that is Shakta. There's a fifth. So Ganapatya, Kaumara, Vaishnava, Saura and Shakta. The sixth one is Shaiva. So the sixth of the Shanmata, the sixth school of worshipping deity, the one who is the giver of auspiciousness, the one who is a giver of all that is good for you and everyone around you. So that is Shiva. So Shiva is not a god of destruction, the great destroyer. I have seen this picture in many comic books and also books published in India, unfortunately, and also all over the world, where Shiva is a very muscular-looking, intimidating-looking person is portrayed, and there is a caption below, the god of destruction. So that is not what Shiva implies. Shiva, the word itself implies auspiciousness, who is responsible for taking the effect back to cause, as I mentioned earlier. So I won't repeat what I said at the beginning. Now, and in fact, those of you who can listen to this lecture again, there is a Sanskrit verse that gives a list of the 6 schools of worship: Shaivam cha Vaishnavam cha Shaktam Sauram Vainayigam tatha Skandam Bhakti Margascha Darshanani Shadevahi. These are the 6 systems of worship that Shankaracharya established. That is different aspects of human life and different functions of the cosmic existence, portrayed as coming, existing, going back to the original state and coming again. That is cyclic. That is origin, preservation, and not destruction but dissolution. Dissolving is totally different from destroying. So that's an important point, remember. So Adityambigam Vishnum Gananadham Maheshwaram Panjayajnavaro Nityam Grihastha Panjapujayed. So it is called Panjayatana Puja. In ancient tradition, you find in Hindu households, they used to have a small shrine in their homes where they used to worship all these deities. So I shall give a few more philosophical background of the concept of Shiva, and then a very important, well-known story, maybe an event, an episode associated with the beginning of Shivaratri. So this is my plan today. Now, the worship of Shiva, the philosophy of worshipping auspiciousness, the giver of auspiciousness, the one who is responsible for dissolving the effect back to cause. It gave birth to a number of systems of philosophy in India, and there have been huge philosophical and mythological books like Shaiva Purana and others. But one distinct school of philosophy of Shiva worship, one belonging to extreme north, Kashmir, another belonged to the extreme south of India, including Sri Lanka. These were two distinct schools of Shiva worship. One is Kashmir Shaivism, the other is the southern Dakshinayana Shaiva, worshipping the southern school of Shaiva tradition. Philosophically, the Kashmir school of Shaivism was a celebrated school of philosophy. It's called Pratyabhijna. So, in fact, the place Kashmir, unfortunately, it is not what it used to be in today's situation, but it was known as Sharada Desha. So it was so there are books like Sharada Tilagam. In fact, Sharada is a lipi that was used for writing an ancient Kashmiri script. Anyway, so there is a distinct school of Shaiva philosophy which evolved in the Pratyabhijna system in Kashmir. And according to them, Lord Shiva, known as Maheshwara, I mean the great Lord of creation, existence and dissolution, is symbolically, metaphorically conceived to be the body of creation, existence. Those of you who may get a very vague idea of what this actually implies can read Fritjof Capra's Tao of Physics. So you find on the cover page there is a depiction of a deity, Shiva portrayed as the one who is the Prapancha Sharira, means the body of existence, who combines within him the whole idea of origin of the universe, preservation of the universe, dissolution of the universe, again not destruction but dissolution, because if you dissolve salt into water, after some time you can bring back salt. If you destroy it, you cannot get back. So, dissolution is accompanied by origin. Origin, preservation, dissolution will be accompanied by origin. The same cycle continues. So this cyclic existence going in a rhythm is portrayed in that Nataraja image that you find in the early editions, I don't know the latest editions, of the well-known work, Tao of Physics of Fritjof Capra, who was a physicist working in the University of Berkeley. So that's actually taken from the Shaiva philosophy. So Shiva himself symbolizes this creation, I mean the body of creation. So in the Pratyabhijna philosophy, the word used to indicate Shiva is Maheshwara, which means that Shiva has no beginning, no end. It is the symbol of the infinite, non-definable, the transcendental reality. If you can have a concrete, visible, graphic presentation of the infinite, the impersonal, then there is no greater image that you can conceive of than Shiva. That's the idea behind. That's why in one of the well-known stotra, Shankaracharya himself writes, Ajam Shashwadam Karanam Karananam Shivam Kevalam Bhasagam Bhasaganam Turiyam Tamaparamadyindahinam Prapadye Param Pavanam Dvedahinam. So Shiva has no birth. That's because he has no end, no death. Shashwada. It is ancient but ever new. It is the cause of all causes. It is the light of all lights. It is the one that removes darkness. Neither beginning nor end. It is a transcendental reality that is always present in us, in the waking, in the dreaming, and the deep sleep states. So it is a very, very sublime philosophical idea. Now, such a highly abstract, highly metaphysically rich idea, in what way does it help us in our life? So, there are many interesting stories which are taken from the lives of great Shaiva saints who are born all over India, including countries like Sri Lanka and other places, Indonesia, other places. You find stories associated with the Shiva concept. So this is a very famous story that is taken from one of the South Indian saintly traditions called 63 Nayanars. His real name was Pushala. It's an old Dravidian name. The story goes like this, the event, rather the episode. So there was a great king. Of course, this king was a historical figure, Rajasimha. He was a Pallava king. He must have lived around 7th or 8th century AD. So this king was a great devotee of Shiva. And so he was a big emperor, he was a very humble person. And he wanted to build a magnificent, huge Shiva temple. So he went all over the country, he collected artisans, priests, architects. And if you go to that temple, Kailasnatha temple in Kanchipuram, you find is a huge, marvelous structure. Very similar to the place where the Chinese president recently visited a few months back. That marble near the seashore. Very similar, very near. Huge granite rock temple constructions. Those of you have seen pictures of the Angkor Wat, you can think, but these towers are much taller and higher. Now, the temple is so huge. Of course, there are many such temples spread over miles and miles of granite rock, 180, 250 feet tall, all granite. So that's a temple he built. Before he actually built this temple, he had collected huge amount of wealth, artisans, and the work went on for decades. And then finally he completed the building of the Shiva temple, and he decided to consecrate this temple on an auspicious day, and he collected astrologers and decided a particular date on which he was planning to install, or rather consecrate the temple. Now, not far away from this place, there was a humble devotee of Shiva. So his name was Pushala. He was poor. He didn't have means to make both ends meet. He was a learned man, a great devotee, but as it happens to many learned people, really learned people, those who are actually going in search of knowledge, not for degrees necessarily, but those who really, there are still, at least till 200 years back, you find there were men and women who just wanted to learn. What are you learning for? Well, that's what I enjoy doing. So learning itself becomes a means and an end. It's a sublime state of human spiritual and cultural evolution, not necessarily spiritual. So this man was such a person, very learned, very humble, and absolutely poor. And he also wanted to build a temple. No, not that he was thinking of building a temple. Suddenly, he heard, and he thought he heard a voice, that you should build a temple for me, as if it is coming from Shiva. And he was meditating on Shiva all these years, doing worship in his own humble way every day. And was in his mental world, he was thinking of Shiva all the time. Now suddenly he thought he heard a voice asking him to build a temple. What will he do? He had no money, no friends, no patronage. So he started building a temple in his world of speculations and thoughts and ideas. In his mind, every day he will think of, well, if at all I had plenty of money, I could have collected a lot of people, lot of help and materials and built a huge temple. But it was daydreaming. But remember, he had a very wonderful, auspicious, spiritually elevating kind of daydreaming. So daydreaming can be very wonderful, it can be very elevating. If you can always think of something good and sublime and noble, that is certainly a great blissful state. So if I had money, I could have built a temple. If I had a lot of help, I could have built a temple. Then I will build such a huge temple, I will build. And he will think, and then he will be doing spiritual practices, reading books on Saiva tradition, chanting the name of Shiva, and doing puja in his own humble way, and mentally building a temple all the time. And finally, it so happened that he thought, well, no, though I cannot build a temple that is visible outside, I have built a temple that is invisible within my own mind. So that temple construction was over almost simultaneously with the completion of the king's temple, which was a huge edifice. You can still go and see the temple, Kailasanatha temple, a huge temple architecture. Very huge, made of all granite, nothing else. Everything is granite. The roof, the pillar, the floor, everything is granite. That's what is easily available in those places. So, the poor man also built a temple. A mental temple in his mind, he built a temple. But remember, when he was thinking about building a temple, an invisible temple, a mental temple, his mind was evolving. That he did not notice. And eventually it so happened that he fixed a date for the consecration of his invisible, imaginary temple in his own, which he built in his own mind. And the same day happens to be the day on which the king had planned to install the temple, consecrate a temple, as a coincidence. So, in a way, he was doing Manasa Puja. You can see a Manasa Puja mantra, which is part of our puja tradition, where all your mental functions, your thoughts, your ideas, your speculations and everything is portrayed as puja, as a worship. So, whole human life can be a kind of worship for the highly evolved. In fact, worship can be a boring, mechanical, useless work for a unevolved, unenlightened person. For an enlightened person, the most secular work can be a puja. It can by both ways, So in one of our Vedantic books, there is a very strong statement. Nivruttirapi mudhasya pravarti rupajayade pravartirapi dhirasya nivrutti phalabhagini. Ashtavakar Gita says, suppose a man who is very worldly minded, all the time nagging, greedy, one day he decides, well, I shall spend a few days in the retreat, the Olima retreat, wherever it is, a few weeks, or maybe in a forest, or in a church, or a temple. I shall spend 14 days, 1 week. I shall spend all my time in meditation, contemplation. After going there, immediately he will take up his laptop and mobile phone. He will be more active with the world, with worldly activities, than he was living in this world. So for him, contemplation itself is a very worldly activity. So worship can be a very worldly activity for the unevolved, unenlightened. At the same time, for the enlightened one, working in this world, in fact, actually working in a computer office or even doing a business can be a contemplative work. So you can be doing business, it can be as good as contemplation. You can be doing contemplation, it could be worse than doing business. So it's a matter of mind. The king was an imperial, powerful king with a lot of money and wealth. And he built a huge temple. And he called astrologers and he decided to have a huge consecration ceremony. And he had spent a lot of money for it. But the poor man, he built an invisible temple. He was so humble, but he was immersed in the spiritual thought and contemplation. So what happens, one night, in fact the previous night, Shiva appeared in a dream to the king. The king is a historical figure. He was a Pallava dynasty. His name was Rajasimha. So in the dream, Shiva told him, I'm sorry, tomorrow I won't be able to come to your temple consecration. I'm sorry. I have to go to another temple consecration, little away from here. That was the temple of this poor man, Pusalar, who had built an invisible, imaginary temple in his mental world. So the king felt outraged. In his own kingdom, one poor fellow has built a temple, and Shiva also spoke a few words of appreciation of the magnificence of the poor man's temple. The king practically lost his sleep, and he decided to, but the king was a real devotee. He thought, if Shiva had praised this poor man's temple so well, then that temple should be much more magnificent than my own temple, which I built over taking 12, 13 years. I also want to see that temple. So the king decided that night he left his kingdom, his palace, went incognito, went to the place, and next day morning he found this man. Somebody told him in the village that this is the man's name, Kusalar, and his hut, small little hut he was sitting. He went and he was a very poor man. He was sitting, eyes closed, meditating. So the king asked him, the king was a man of wisdom. He had the sense, he had the common sense to be humble. So he asked this man, I heard that you have built a wonderful temple. The man was surprised because he built a temple in his own mind, in his imagination. Maybe no one could have known about it. So who told you? Then the king told him, I got this information. Shiva himself appeared to me in a dream and told me. So, and then the king went to the king went there and went to his little shrine in his home, where he used to meditate and build this huge edifice, imaginary mental temple. So the Shiva didn't want to go to the consecration ceremony of the magnificent temple. So this happened on a Shivaratri day. This is one important. In fact, all the dream that he got happened in a Shivaratri day. Another story. In fact, remember, without these stories, these higher spiritual principles would not have survived. Can you ever imagine, let us say, for example, without the parables of Jesus, you won't find people directly going to the metaphysical, philosophical ideas of biblical theology. So parables speak more loudly and more clearly and with greater force about the great spiritual truths that Jesus taught. So you find many of the great spiritual ideas and philosophical ideas live in the minds of the masses through these stories. The stories are not mere stories. The stories have a message behind these stories. If we lose that message, and if somebody, I'm interested in philosophy, I don't believe in mythological stories, it's just like I will eat a bone, dry bone. You won't be getting much protein and fats if you go about chewing dry bone. You won't get it. because we need religion and spirituality to feed our mind and attitudes and emotions. For that, these stories are very important. Without these stories of these great saints, maybe no religious philosophy can survive. Another story is called, again another very interesting story is that story is again related to another devotee. He was really not a devotee actually, but he was a good man, a humble man. He had faith in Shiva, but he was not a devotee like the early character whom we discussed just now. His name was Suswara. He was a hunter by profession. So as he did every day, he went to a forest. Every day he used to go to a forest. One day he went to a forest. It was late in the evening. It got dark. He could not return. So there were wild animals all around. And suddenly he found he can't see any sign anywhere. His eyes had gone blind because of darkness, utter darkness. And the wild animals howling all around. So he climbed a tree and he sat there. So many wild animals came around catching the scent of a human being. So he was frightened and he sat on a branch of the tree, upper branch of the tree. And but then he was scared, so he wanted to keep himself awake, because if he went to sleep, he would fall down and will be killed and eaten by the wild animals. So he kept himself awake by constantly plucking leaves from the branch of the tree on which he was sitting. And as he kept himself busy to avoid falling asleep, these leaves fell on the floor. And it went on till morning. So in the morning, he got down and he found all the wild animals had already disappeared. But there was a Shiva image under the tree. And the leaves that he was plucking the whole night was Belur leaves. So he found a Shiva image covered with Belur leaves. And that night was Shivaratri. So the story goes like that: Shiva appeared and liberated him from these life cycles. About nirvana, so to speak. Freedom from this problem of cyclic existence. So many of these stories illustrate, on the one hand, the philosophical depth of Shiva concept and also the basic human touch. Shiva doesn't bother about your bank balance. He doesn't bother about the position or status. He rather preferred to go to the consecration ceremony of the humble devotee who had no money, who had no food to eat even, who didn't know where his meals came from. But he spent all his lifetime chanting Shiva's name, contemplating on Shiva. And he discarded the king's desire to be present on his consecration ceremony. Rather, he preferred to be present on the temple consecration ceremony of the poor man. So you find a basic human touch, a spiritual humanism. So many of these stories associated with Shiva are so graphic and so illustrative. And there are still more stories. And with that I shall conclude. Again it is related to a hunter. A poor hunter used to go to forest and he saw a Shiva temple, and his profession was hunting game, killing animals. And every day he used to go to the shrine of the small temple and put a piece of meat on the shrine. Every day, evening he did that. Next day morning, the professional priest will come from the village and he will find that Shiva image, there's a huge piece of meat placed in front of the deity of Shiva. So the priest will be outraged. Professional Orthodox priest will remove it and take a bath and do puja. But Shiva had a different outlook. It so happened that priest began to wonder, what's the matter? Every day this piece of meat is appearing and I'm removing, again it's happening. What's the matter? Who is the mischief maker? So one day he hid himself, was hiding behind a tree, and then in the evening the hunter came with a piece of meat and did his own version of puja. Then he caught hold of him, the priest. The priest thought, well, this time I caught hold of him. Then Shiva, it is said that a voice was heard from within the shrine, he is my real devotee, not you. So you can imagine. So you find many such stories are associated with all these Shivaratri, all these Durga Puja, all these traditions. These stories actually send a strong message of what spirituality actually ought to be or should be. Such stories are found in the lives of many other mystics and real devotees in all traditions. So on the one hand, the highest philosophical grandeur of the Shiva concept. On the other hand, the simple, the human touch of the real concept. Both you find in Shivaratri. So now I have just tried to portray some aspects of this very important celebration. So thank you. And we will have Shivaratri this coming 21st Friday. There will be worship here at 7:30 p.m. in the evening. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tatsat. Sri Ramakrishna Order.